Ladies and gentlemen, if you came here for a good time and a long time and you love women's soccer, you've come to the right place. My name is Bryce, and this is the women's soccer slash football podcast that officially has no name yet. This is episode one, so if you're coming here and you're looking for a new podcast, you've come to the right place. I call this episode, of course, Pilot, since it's the first one. It's really common amongst all new TV shows, movies, things like that. So yeah, welcome. And the way this is going to kind of go is we're first going to kick off with an introduction, first of which is the topic. And the topic for today's pilot episode is actually going to be us predicting what the United States women's national team roster is going to be for the 2021 Olympics. And since it's about 6-7 months away, it's going to be a wild time, so stay tuned for that. And we kind of mix it up a little bit here. So, like, what I'll do is I'll start off with a few segments for a little bit of fun just to get warmed up, and then we'll move into other main topics as well. Since this is the first pilot of the episode, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on what the plan is. So each week, what I plan to do is about a half hour to an hour podcast. So if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening on Anchor or Spotify, welcome. I'm really excited to start this. A little bit of background, like I said, my name is Bryce, and I've been actually running a TikTok, Instagram, and several other social media platforms under the name of Bankrupt Hippo, and it's all about women's soccer and women's football. So it's a really good time, and I decided that it's time to transition this over to podcast because people love podcasts, myself included. So, kind of just jumping right in, we'll get started right off the bat. First segment I like to do on these podcasts is the featured women's soccer content of the week. And for this week, that's going to be Women Kick Balls. And it's a written blog currently, and it's also an Instagram account. So what I basically did is I found this account by recommendation of somebody who actually watches my live streams on Instagram every Friday. Shout out to you, Heidi. Thank you so much for the recommendation. I signed up and I subscribed to the Women Kickballs Instagram account, and they sent me this really sticker. So thank you guys so much for this. I can't wait to put it on my laptop and look at it each day and also read more of your written content. So shout out to you guys. If you guys want to go ahead and check them out, like I said, they are Women Kickballs on Instagram, and I also believe they're a blog. So stay on the lookout for them. Keep up the good work, guys. Now that brings us into our second segment. So now the second segment is usually going to be the women's footballer of the week. And for those of you who are in the United States like I am, I currently reside in Wisconsin. In America, we call it women's soccer, but around the rest of the world, they call it women's football. So that's why I think I'm going to start calling this podcast the women's soccer slash football podcast, because it pretty much caters to everybody, which is nice. But nonetheless, so the women's football of the week for this week is actually going to be Leah Galton. She's currently up for the FAWSL December Player of the Month award, given her performances with United recently. And if you've had the pleasure of watching Leah play the last several weeks, you'll see that she's had some stunning goals and she's played really well on the left wing for United. She's had a lot of threatening attack, and with her on the left wing and Tobin on the right wing, they've pretty much been unstoppable. Hence why United haven't lost this FAWL season. So that's really, really exciting too. And the best part about this is that there's also a few other really good players up for FAWSL Player of the Week too. So for me personally, I'm not sure if Sam Kerr's up for it currently, but she's on my short list to win the WSL Player of the Month award, mainly because she had a hat trick like 3 weeks ago, I believe against Reading. She scored at least once in the last few games, so I can't recall the details off the top of my head, but that's kind of how that goes. So here we are. Moving on to the third segment before we get into the main topics of the evening, and we've got a lot of good ones because a lot of good stuff in women's football has happened this week. So nonetheless, let's get right into it again. So I'm going to preface this a little bit. I am obsessed with Dunkin' Donuts, okay? And I used to go just about every day when I was in college. I went probably twice a day and spent way too much money there, but now that I'm out and I'm working, I have the money to do those things. But nonetheless, I go to Dunkin' Donuts pretty often, and I always like to change up my drink when I go. But lately, I've been sticking with the same drink each and every week. And for this week, it's going to be a nice large hot coffee with caramel cream and sugar. And it is amazing if you get it and mix it up. And it's just phenomenal. So I highly recommend it to anybody who is enjoying coffee. Or if you'd rather just make it yourself at home and save some money, nothing wrong with that too. I've been doing that a lot lately because what I like to do is I like to make my coffee and then mix in a whole packet of hot cocoa in there. And then it's basically like a mocha. It might be a low-grade mocha, but still a mocha nonetheless. And it tastes amazing. So if you're looking to try something different with your coffee, I highly recommend doing that as well. All right, guys. So with all those warm-up segments down and out of the way, now we can start getting into the meat of the podcast. And like I said earlier, the main topic of this episode is going to be pilot, and it's going to be predicting the 2021 U.S. Women's National Team roster for the Tokyo Olympics. And with the pandemic going on this year, there's been a lot of uncertainty around the roster, especially since Vlatko Andonovski has kind of been experimenting a little bit. This is going to be his first major tournament as the head coach of the squad, so it should be really exciting. He's tried several different things in several different camps now. In the October camp, it was a little bit more exploratory. November, I think, was a little bit more focused. And then now that as we're moving into January, for context of those of you listening, it's actually New Year's Day of 2021, so hooray, we made it past 2020, thank goodness. So happy New Year to all of you. But about a week ago, the inspiration for this topic came about a week ago when I posted a short 1-minute clip, I think it was, and it was just a little screenshot of my phone with my iPod, or not my iPod, my iPhone notes, just detailing who would all be on my roster for the 2020 Olympics if I was Vlatko Andonovski. Now, a little bit of context here. In the Olympics, your roster is going to be smaller than what it would be for the World Cup. For the Olympics, if I'm not mistaken, and I just looked this up on the Olympic website the other day, you get 16 field players and you get 2 goalkeepers for the Olympics. And as far as I know, that hasn't changed. If any of you know for sure if it's changed or not, feel free to put it down in the comments. When I checked this afternoon, it hasn't changed. So that's the basis of my list. 16 field players, 2 goalkeepers. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the players that I've selected and also say why I selected them possibly over some other players that might have been worthy. And then when I'm done with that, I'll actually talk a little bit about some of the bubble players I have. I have a list of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. We have a list of 8 bubble players, meaning that they're really close to maybe making the team, and they might even make the team, but I had to ultimately leave them out because, like I said, you can only pick 18 players, 16 of which are field players and 2 of which are goalkeepers. So without further ado, let's get right into the list. With my first pick, this is actually the first player on my team sheet, and I think it's with good reason. There's probably 1 or 2 other people I could have put first, but I decided to put Christen Press as the first player that I selected. I think she's a shoo-in for the roster because, for one, she's probably performed better than any other U.S. Women's National Team player this year, aside from Sam Ewis, who, of course, won the 2020 U.S. Women's National Team Player of the Year award. But there's no denying that as Christen Press has gotten older, she's just gotten better and better. She's 32 going on 33, I believe. And it's like the more she plays, the more I see her as a natural striker. So I'm pretty sure she'll either be supplementing or possibly backing up or maybe even starting over Alex Morgan. We'll see, since she hasn't been in the greatest form this year. But the way that she plays, she's very, very threatening. And to me, she's also proved that she can play almost in a false 9 position. When they were playing Netherlands in the friendly a few weeks ago, I saw her kind of facilitating play with Tobin as Tobin was getting up the left-hand side of the pitch. So I think that Christen's not only proving that she can be versatile, but that they can rely on her, and she can actually be a really prolific goal scorer. And I think she's only been continuing to prove that not only in the WSL, but also in the NWSL and at international level as well as facilitate play. So she's always a threat. She's been in fine form. I think she's a shoo-in for the roster. Moving on to the second part of the roster, the second slot that I selected. I selected Alex Morgan for the second slot. Now, I know I mentioned earlier that she hasn't really played a whole lot, and of course, she just gave birth to her daughter, Charlie, which congratulations to her and Servando. That's really, really exciting. And she just finished a loan spell with Tottenham. She's now returning to the NWSL back to Orlando because she didn't want to stay, which I don't blame her. When you're raising a new family, that can be very, very hard when you're overseas for a long, extended period of time. But nonetheless, Alex Morgan, to me, is still one of the most talented strikers in the entire world. Just because she didn't play a ton in 2020. Really, who did play a lot in 2020? I mean, given the pandemic, not a lot of players have played a ton. But it's not like her talent disappears, right? When you're out of the game for a certain period of time, it's not like you just become a bad player. You got to slowly work yourself back into it. And the good part about her going on loan to Tottenham was she at least got to get back into 90 minutes fitness. She got to kind of work out the kinks a little bit, and she scored a couple penalties. She had plenty of penalty practice, which is great. And I wouldn't say that she had an extremely successful loan spell at Tottenham, but she just had a baby, so of course, what can you really expect, you know? So I think she's a shoo-in for the roster. I still think she's one of the world's best. Some people might disagree, but I think by and large, a lot of people would agree with the notion that she's still one of the most talented, and because of that, she should be on the roster. And I will say she's more talented than any other strikers that the U.S. would have anyway. So she belongs on the list, and that's why she's in my second spot. Moving on to the third spot now. And this one is, I don't think, a surprise to anybody. This is pretty unanimous. Tobin Heath. Tobin Heath is definitely going to be on the roster too. She has proven, I think, to be indispensable for the United States roster. If you guys notice, I was watching the United States women's national team game against the Netherlands in their friendly a few weeks ago. And not only was she always an attacking threat, but she was also really good at defending. She really led the high press because I know that the U.S. likes to do that. They like to put pressure on their opponents and always remind them, hey, we're here. So if you don't step it up, we're going to take the ball and we're going to score. And she would always lead the press. She would be what they call the trigger. Julie Foudy mentioned this during the game, but she would either say, I'm trying to remember what the keywords were exactly. It was like stay, go, things that you would associate properly, or if the team just saw her run and press high, they would follow her lead basically. So that's showing that they rely on her for leadership, not only offensively but defensively too. So on both sides of the ball, she's absolutely phenomenal. And she just won November Player of the Month award in the WSL, so she's been in great form on top of it too. And she's been indispensable for United. She scored a brace, I believe, twice now. Manchester City, she scored a really important goal when Lucy Bronze coughed it up to her. So she comes up in big moments. She comes up consistently, and she's still one of the best wingers in the world, if not the best. So that's why I've got Tobin on the roster as well. Moving on a little bit further. So now we're at the fourth spot. Barring that she's not injured, I've got Rose Lavelle making the team too. Now, I think Rose, as of the World Cup, has established herself as one of the world's best midfielders. The way that she controls the ball and is able to press on attack forward is just incredible. She is the most underrated dribbler, I think, in the entire world. I don't think anybody really appreciates or realizes the skill and the technicality of her play. I mean, she nutmegs one or two players a game, and if you don't believe me, go ahead and watch like the last few games. It's honestly incredible. And the way that she just goes about it, it's really subtle, it's full of finesse, and she scores pretty often. In the Netherlands game, she basically won the ball in their defensive half, hauled all the way up to the attacking third, received the ball, and scored with her left foot in a worldly of a strike outside of the penalty area. Not very many midfielders can do that consistently, and Rose is one of those people. So she is a shoe-in. I would be shocked if she didn't start. The only reason that she won't be on this team is if she's got a major injury, which I hope that's not the case because right now she's got a major injury, and that's why she hasn't been playing a ton for City, among other reasons. I don't know what the deal is with City's head coach not using her in a midfield spot. He keeps trying to use her in a winger position. She's not a winger. She is a forward, but I'm not a coach. So, I mean, take that with a grain of salt. Moving on a little bit further. So now this next player, to me, this next player has turned into top 3 best midfielders in the world for me. And I'd say Rose is pretty close to that too, but she has become an absolute superstar she went from being basically nowhere on the radar to one of the best in the world. And it's your 2020 Women's National Team Player of the Year. That's Sam Mewis. So Sam Mewis, or Tower of Power, as us fans like to call her, for those of you who know, but she has absolutely established herself as the most powerful attacking and defensive midfielding force I have ever seen. Whenever she's in the squad for the United States, she's got a really solid aerial presence, not only on the attacking side for set pieces, but also on the defensive side as teams are crossing the ball in. And the best part about her is she is extremely consistent. It's very rare where I see Sam Mewis have a poor game, whether it's for club or for country, really. For Manchester City, she's had nothing short of one of the most outstanding performances I've seen from a player that's being loaned out. Actually, no. Let me correct myself there. Sam wasn't loaned out. She signed a deal with Manchester City. That's right. She signed a 1-year deal. So I just want to make that clear. She's not on loan. She signed a 1-year deal. But she finds a way to score almost every game, kind of like Rose does. but she's also a defensive threat too, and she's so powerful that she wins pretty much any midfield battle. I mean, when between her, Rose, and Julie, I don't think the Netherlands midfield held the ball for more than like a minute at a time when they were playing against each other, and a lot of that is credit to Sam, and a lot of it is Julie too, because Julie is one of the best center. Actually, I'll go as far as to say Julie's the best center defensive men in the world. But between the two of them, they're unstoppable together, and they have a lot of chemistry. So Sam's a shoe-in for the roster. In fact, like if it was either her or Kristen was going to be my first selection on the team sheet. So that's where I'm at with Sam, and I would think that a lot of other people are really high on her too. So that's where we're at with that. But now we're moving on to the sixth spot. So we're getting close to halfway there. Now we're moving on to Julie Ertz. Julie Ertz was my sixth pick. And as you kind of noticed, I'm going forward to midfield to defense. So follow along with the platform a little bit with me. But so with Julie, she, like I said, she's established herself consistently as one of the best center defensive mids in the world. And according to The Guardian, she's like top 10 in the world. And I would completely agree with that. She is a consistent defensive force that is always able to win balls away from forwards, from midfielders. She doesn't care. She'll throw down with anybody up on the field, and it's amazing to see because she not only retains but she regains possession for the United States whenever they lose it or whenever they need it most. So she's really clutch in that regard. And plus two, she's also good for scoring too. Whenever they're on corners and set pieces, she's always in the box ready to head that ball in, and when she gets her head to it, 9 times out of 10 she's scoring. So between her and Sam, like I said, they're a dynamic duo that needs to be on the roster. And if they are, they're going to be ensured success. So that's where I'm at with Julia Ertz. The honorable Julia Ertz, as some might call her. And she's going to be on the roster too. So that's kind of where I'm at with her. Moving on a little bit more. Still got a few more midfielders to go through here. And it looks like we'll cycle through them throughout. But this probably isn't much of a surprise to many. But Lindsey Herrera. Lindsey Herrera is also going to be in this list. I'm going to say this. So the United States is has the most stacked midfield in the world. There's 6 or 7 people on this roster that could all be starters across any team in the entire world. And that was the hardest part about making this roster, was trying to find who are we going to include, who are we going to throw out, because they're all world-class players. Lindsey Herrera, I think, is really valuable because they can kind of play into like a 4-person rotation in the midfield. What do I mean by that? Well, between Roosevelt, Sam Mewis, Julie Ertz, and Lindsey Herrera, you've kind of got this playing. I don't know what the word is for 4 people, but you've got like this 4-person almost group that can kind of cycle in and out if one person needs a rest. You can easily interchange any of them, and you'll have no problems. I think Lindsey excels more of an attacking role, like a center attacking mid position. And where Lindsey to me shines is her heading ability to score. If you guys haven't seen, just look up on YouTube Lindsey Herrera heading balls in to score. Every header that she has is absolute money. Half the time when she heads it in, she's got like a curling header that just beats the keeper straight out. And it's honestly incredible to see. In fact, if I ever meet her one day, that's the first thing I'm going to ask is, where did she learn to head the ball? Because, wow, it's among the world's best. I believe the NWSL on Twitter put out a little poll yesterday, or maybe it was the Equalizer. I can't remember which, but they put out a poll of what was the NWSL's best goal of the year. And one of Lindsey Herrera's headers was on there, and that was just so appropriate. It was perfect for it. And that skill is just something the United States need in order to keep their foot on the pedal, so to speak, and in order to keep scoring. So Lindsey Herrera to me is a shoo-in, and I think any coach would be insane not to have Rose, Sam, Julie, and Lindsey all in the roster. So that's where I'm coming from with that. And barring Lindsey's not hurt, she's going to be in the roster. Lindsey usually, knock on wood, Lindsey usually doesn't have any injury issues, so expect to see her in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Moving on to the 8th spot now. And it looks like this is the last midfielder that I've picked in this roster. It's a player that you guys probably haven't heard too much about. She's younger, and she's actually in the process of getting her citizenship. It's Katerina Macario. For those of you who don't know who Katerina Macario is, she actually doesn't play professionally yet. She currently plays for Stanford University as, I believe, an attacking midfielder. And it's perfect because now there's 5 really solid players that can play and rotate in and out in the United States roster for the Olympics. The reason why I've put Katerina Macario, somebody who isn't even technically a professional player, into this roster is because Vlatko is really, really high on her, and I can see why. If you look on Stanford's website, she's pretty much won every single accolade that you can win multiple times. It's insane. She's won Player of the Year award for the NCAA like twice, and I believe she's in for it for a third time. I'm trying to remember how much Stanford has actually played in 2020 given the pandemic, but Vlatko's really high on her, really high on her future. People are saying that she is the future of the midfield. I'm excited to see how it turns out. The key with this is it's a little bit of a risk because you never really know, if a player's dominating at the collegiate level, you just never know how that's going to translate professionally. So time will tell ultimately. But since Vlatko's so high on her and he's talked about her multiple times in the media, getting her eligible so she can play with them in the Olympics, I expect her to be on the roster in some fashion. So expect to see Katerina Macario on the list and also look for her name in future years as well. Moving on now. So now we're starting to get into more of the defending side of things. I've got a couple more of attackers in here, but I'll get to that later on because they're a little bit longer topic of discussion. But defenders I've got on this list, they're all kind of no-brainers, exactly who you'd expect to be on the list. I'm actually going to list them all off at once. So Becky Sauerbrunn, Abby Dahlkemper, Kelly O'Hara, and Crystal Dunn. All 4 of them were in the squad for the Netherlands friendly, and Vlatko's been watching them all pretty closely this year, so I expect all of them to play and be on the roster. And why wouldn't you? They've been the best back line in the world for the last several years, so why would you even break that up? And they've all been performing excellently this year, so I don't really see a reason why any of them shouldn't be playing. And they've all been playing in some fashion in either the Challenge Cup or the Fall Series or even overseas, so expect to see all 4 of them in the roster. The only way I can see one of them not being in the roster is if Kelly O'Hara for some reason gets injured. She's been having some injury troubles this year. I believe she's coming back from a major ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken. But if she's not hurt, expect them all 4 of them to be in the roster. So I kind of cheated. I kind of went through spots 9 through 12 right away there, but rapid fire, why not just get out of the way right away? Moving on. So now we're into the 13th spot. We're still on defenders. This is going to be the first area, I think, of major debate amongst myself and other fans of the United States Women's National Team. I've got Tierna Davidson in this roster. Let me explain why. I think Tierna Davidson is a little bit underrated by many, and I also think she is very versatile. She can play outside back, but she can also play center in the center defending position. And Becky Sauerbrunn, she's 35 going on 36, and when she retires, I think Tierna is going to be the natural replacement for Becky, and she's going to end up pairing up with Abby Dahlkemper in the back line for years down the road. And Tierna's got a ton of talent to her, too. After just watching her play for Chicago, I think she's solidified herself as a really solid defender, and I think she can carry those talents over the United States Women's National Team. And right now is the time in order to get her integrated in the squad so that when Becky does eventually hang up her boots, Tierna is going to be ready to. Moving on a little bit further, we're going to kind of jump back to Tierna in a little while when we get to my bubble players, but stick with me here. Moving on now, so we're going to go into the 14th spot. I've got Allie Krieger on this list. Now, I know what I have an idea of what some people might be thinking. Allie hasn't played a ton this year. Allie's still one of the most experienced defenders in the United States who can play for this roster, and she's still playing, I think, at a really high level. And I think she's playing better than Emily Sonnet, which is why I've got her in this list. So that's my main reason for that. Moving on next. This particular player has been battling an injury for pretty much all of 2020. It's Carly Lloyd. I'll just go out and say it outright. Carly Lloyd, I think this will be her last major tournament for the United States, but I still think she's got the talent and the skill in order to perform at a very high level. I've got her playing as a forward rather than a midfield because I think the midfield's a little crowded right now. But Carly Lloyd, she's getting close to 40. I believe she's 39 right now. And I think she's got enough left in the tank in order to perform really, really well at this Olympics. I don't think she'll start by any means, and I don't think that she necessarily should, barring that players aren't hurt, of course. I think she's going to be one of those that kind of comes off the bench, gets you a couple goals when needed. She'll probably come in the striking position, I would imagine anyway, because that's a big part of her game she's been working on. But I think she's got more talent still than the likes of Lynn Williams, Sophia Smith, Mallory Pugh. I think all around she's just a better player, and her being a seasoned veteran and having more major tournament experience than just about anybody on the roster besides Megan Rapinoe, I think why wouldn't you bring that into your roster in order to improve it? That's veteran leadership. So I've got her on this list nonetheless. Moving on a little bit further now. So I'm going to leave this one last forward for last. I'm going to go into my goalkeepers because this is another hot topic of debate. Undisputed, Alyssa Nair's the best United States goalkeeper that we have. She's going and she's going to play very well, I think, in the Olympics. I've heard that some fans aren't exactly high on her talent. I can't imagine why. Seriously, she's been starting for the States for forever. She's been outperforming every goalkeeper that I've watched anyway. So she's the United States undisputed number one for me. So she's definitely going. But the second spot, so now remember, like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the podcast, you can only have two keepers. And the second keeper, this spot is kind of a toss-up. For me, I'm picking somebody who's got way more experience and is seen action before, because if Alyssa gets hurt, you're going to want an experienced goalkeeper because you only got one left. So you have to pick up this backup spot wisely. So with that, you can imagine who my next pick is. It's Ashlynn Harris. Now, Ashlynn Harris, I still think is performing at a really high level. She's shown it in the fall series. She's shown it to us very recently, and it's like, why leave her out of the roster? She's been Nair's backup for a long time. She's got 30-something caps. She's ready to perform, and she's also really fierce in her play, and you want someone gritty and edgy like that to come in and kind of revitalize the squad, especially when you need it most. If Alyssa gets hurt, Ashlynn's going to have no problem coming in and being an enforcer in that goalkeeping spot. Now, what you might be thinking is, okay, what about Jane Campbell? What about Aubry, Bledsoe? If this wasn't the Olympics, or maybe even Adriana France, but if this wasn't the Olympics, I think that there'd be maybe a better argument for Aubry, Bledsoe, or Jane Campbell to come in and be in that number two. But even if it was the Olympics, there'd be three goalkeeping spots, and Jane or Aubry could take the third one. But for the arguments that I outlined earlier about experience, coming in as a backup when you have that experience, I think for this particular use case, Ashlynn Harris is going to be more valuable than any other goalkeeper in the United States at this point. And plus, not to mention, Adriana France, I don't think has really even played this year very much at all, if at all. I think she's been hurt pretty much the entire 2020 year. I think she had a leg injury. Don't quote me on that. No, I might have to look that up later. But so she wasn't even really in consideration. She's not even on my bubble list for the roster at this point. But we'll talk a little bit more about Aubry, Bledsoe and Jane Campbell in just a minute when I get to my bubble players. But now we've actually come upon the 16th field player that I have in this roster. And this is by far the biggest hot topic of debate that I've found so far in making this list. Megan Rapinoe. Megan Rapinoe, if she wants to play, that's the key. If Megan Rapinoe wants to play, she will be on the Olympic roster. Now, the reason why I say if she wants to play is because if you listen to her interview with Julie Foudy and Lynn Ozawi on the Laughter Permitted podcast, which if you haven't listened to yet and you're a women's soccer fan or just a women's sports fan in general, highly recommend checking them out. They're on Spotify. They're pretty much anywhere you can listen to podcasts. But anyways, Megan Rapinoe is just coming off of winning the 2019 Player of the Year award for FIFA, a World Cup win, and a Ballon d'Or. She's a Ballon d'Or winner, and to me, she's still one of the most talented wingers in the year. Granted, I know she basically has not played at all this year, but your talent doesn't disappear overnight. Like I said earlier, just because you don't play for a few... I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. Just because you take a break from playing doesn't mean you just lose all your talent automatically. I get it, Megan Rapinoe is getting up there in age, but her talent is still there. It's not like she's 45 or anything like that. Her talent's not going to disappear overnight. She's not that old. And at the end of the day, I know Megan hasn't played a lot. And I know that a lot of people are high on people like Lynn Williams and Sophia Smith, but here's the deal. Lynn Williams and Sophia Smith, they have been playing. They've gotten minutes with the United States team. They've gotten minutes in the NWSL Challenge Cup and Fall Series. I don't think either one of them have proven that they are more talented than Megan Rapinoe is right now. Lynn Williams in the game against the Netherlands, she had, I think, 6 or 7 chances and wasted all of them. Now, She's I think she's probably the fastest female player in the world. And I also think she is a really talented winger. However, Megan Rapinoe is more talented. She's got better service into the box, and she's also one of the best penalty and free kick takers in the world. And she's probably the best leader the United States team has ever seen. That's evidenced by the way that she handled the 2019 World Cup and the equal pay lawsuit. She is one of the best leaders I have ever seen. Just because she hasn't played as of late does not mean her talent is gone and doesn't mean her leadership is gone. She is still an indispensable piece on this roster that needs to play in this Olympics. And for those reasons, I think she's going to be on this roster. Now, if Lynn Williams and Sophia Smith played out of their minds and were breaking scoring records, I think there'd be a little bit more leeway for them, and maybe I kick Megan Rapinoe off this roster. But the reality is they haven't played that well, and they really haven't played that much more than Megan Rapinoe either. I mean, Sophia Smith, in terms of United States minutes, she made an appearance against the Netherlands as a sub for like 10 minutes, maybe, I think it was. Her and Jaylene Howell made late subs, so to me, she wasn't even really in the conversation at this point. She's the future, but she's not right now. That might be a little harsh, but that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. This team is stacked right now. So that's kind of where I stand on the Megan Rapinoe versus Lynn Williams sort of debate. Megan's still the most talented. She's still a better leader, and I think if I had to pick one of them in the game, Megan Rapinoe is going to give you a lot more bang for your buck. So now that completes my 16-player roster and 2 goalkeepers. Now let's move on to the bubble players I have. I'm going to sound off the entire list for you right here. So here are my players on the bubble, meaning that they're not going to be on the team, but they could be given the right circumstances. Emily Sonnet, Midge Purce, Lynn Williams, Sophia Smith, Mallory Pugh, Jane Campbell, Christy Muah, and Aubry Bledsoe. Let's kind of go down each of them, and I'm going to reveal a little bit how they might get into the roster and why I might have left them off. So for Emily Sonnet, a couple of pundits, I guess, have sort of expressed their I don't want to say displeasure in Emily Sonnet's play over the last year, but I don't think a lot of people are very high on Emily Sonnet's defending talent as of right now, meaning that there's doubt as to whether or not she's going to make the team. I think Emily Sonnet is a very skilled defender in the NWSL. However, it's not like she's a 20-year-old up-and-coming player. She's starting to get to be that veteran sort of role, and I just don't think in this particular case she's versatile enough or skilled enough to really make the roster over Tierna Davidson. For that reason, I've left her off my list. Now, I could be wrong. Like I said, I am not the United States Women's National Team coach. Only Vlatko Andonovski is that. Neither am I a professional player, nor have I ever played professionally. But that's just kind of going with my guns here. I don't think Emily Sonnet's going to make the list, and I don't even think Vlatko is really that high on her. I could be wrong, because Vlatko's got a certain style. He watches certain players, and he has all year. So we'll see how that goes. I think there's a chance Emily Sonnet will be on the roster, but she didn't make my prediction. We'll see how that goes. So, moving on a little bit more. Another reason why, I'm going to tie this in a little bit with Emily Sonnet, but the reason why I think Emily Sonnet might have a hard time making this roster is because of Vlatko's recent discovery, which is Midge Purce. Now, a lot of you know Midge Purce as the forward who has been a breakout this year for Sky Blue. However, notice where Vlatko has put Midge Purce in the last couple camps. He has listed her as a defender and has put her in an outside back position. There's something that Vlatko sees in Midge Purce, probably in the same way that he sees Crystal Dunn, where she's got enough versatility and talent to defend not only effectively, but efficiently too. And I think that he sees something that in Midge Purce, especially her being a younger player, where she could probably surpass Emily Sonnet in terms of talent. And he played her quite a bit in the friendly against the Netherlands, so I think he is high enough on Midge Purce to the point where he might even take her over Tierna Davidson, and he probably would take her over Emily Sonnet. So that's kind of where I'm at with Midge Purce on this bubble. I see a spot in this roster for her, or maybe if he's not high on Allie Krieger, maybe he's picking up Midge Purce too. I know she hasn't had the world's most experience in that position, but neither did Crystal Dunn until they moved her along. So that's kind of where we're at with that. I think there's a chance Mitch Purse could be a defender in the roster. Moving on. So that brings us to Lynn Williams. Now, Lynn Williams has been one of the most prolific goal scorers for the NWSL in the last 3-4 years. However, her finishing ability does not match that of a natural striker. To be a really prolific, amazing world-class striker, you have to be able to finish your chances. And what the United States-Netherlands friendly, I think, really proved to me as a fan is that Lynn Williams, once again, she can't not only finish in the NWSL, she has a lot of trouble finishing the NWSL. That's a valid criticism. But she also has trouble finishing at the international stage. And when you're playing in a major tournament like the Olympics, you've got to make the most of your chances. I mean, some of these chances that she had against the Netherlands, she wasn't even making the keeper work. I mean, she would sky the ball, she'd shoot it 5 yards wide. You can't do that when you're playing up against the world's best teams. And when the United States is stomping on the throat of their enemies and the teams that they play, they want to make the most of their chances. I don't think Lynn really gives them that chance. She is highly effective in the NWSL. I think a large part of that is because the North Carolina Courage around her is just a powerhouse. Dabinia feeding her always helps a lot. I think Dabinia is top 10 in the world too. That's a story for another podcast. But I think Lynn Williams, that lack of finishing ability is going to keep her out of the Olympic roster. Not to say that for the next World Cup that she won't be in the roster. There could be a chance if this pool was a little bit larger, I might put Lynn Williams in it, but for the finishing reason alone, I don't see her making this roster. Moving on a little bit further now, you heard me mention her name a little bit earlier when we were kind of touching on Megan Rapinoe, but Sophia Smith. Sophia Smith is also on the bubble for me. Looking back on it, I kind of wish I wouldn't have listed her as a bubble player. I think Sophia is just way too young and way too inexperienced all the way around, and honestly not high enough on Vlatko's list in order to be a forward in this roster. I do realize that the United States women's national team forwards are starting to get a little bit older. Alex Morgan's in her 30s, Kristen Press is in her 30s, Tobin's in her 30s, Carly's in her 30s, Megan's in her 30s. Pretty much all the forwards are in their 30s, and they start to need to get a little bit of young lifeblood in there. I don't think that the Olympics is the time for that. I think between the major tournaments of the Olympics and the World Cup, that's where you get those players in to experiment a little. I know that's a little contradictory to what I said earlier with Katerina Macario. However, I think Vlatko looks at Katerina Macario as the exception. Like, I think he must think that she's such a sure thing that he's willing to overlook that experience bit in order to bring her along. So that I'm just covering my bases a little bit there in that aspect. But for Sophia Smith, she had a lot of ferocity and a lot of aggression in her play when she was subbed on in the friendly. And that's good for a young player to kind of start getting comfortable playing in the field, playing against world-class opponents, playing with world-class teammates. But I just think it's too early for Sophia Smith to really have a breakthrough in the squad. Now, if she got subbed on and scored like a hat trick in the last 5 minutes of the game, that's a different story, but she didn't do that. And for that reason, I don't really see her making the roster. There's a small sliver of a chance if a lot of these players get hurt. Some of them just don't want to play, like in Megan Rapinoe's case. She expressed before that she might not want to play. She could take it or leave it, I believe, is what she said in her interview with Julie Foudy that I mentioned earlier. But that's kind of where I'm at with Sophia Smith. Moving on to another forward player that very well could be in this roster, but I am really not 100% certain. Mallory Pugh. Mallory Pugh, I believe, didn't play much at all in 2020. I think she played 30 minutes, I believe is what I saw the other day. 30 minutes, I think she was able to get in for Sky Blue. There's no denying that Mallory Pugh is one of the pieces of the future of the United States women's national team. She's going to be one of the world's best right wingers someday, I think, personally. But the reality is she's been battling injury all year long. And when it comes between her and some of these experienced vets, I think the experienced vets, when it comes to these major tournaments, have it. And plus, I don't think Mallory Pugh is going to be match fit in order to play in the Olympics. I have a feeling she's still going to be hurt or she's going to get another injury. I mean, every time you turn around, she's hurt again, which is horrible. I feel really bad for her because these professional footballers. They just want to play. They want to play with their craft. That's what they love to do. But the reality is Mallory Pugh's been hurt so often. I don't even know if she'll be fit to play in the Olympics. So that's the reason why I put her on the bubble. My call here is if Megan Rapinoe doesn't want to play for whatever reason, pandemic, otherwise, maybe she's just done and she wants to retire. I've got Mallory Pugh breaking into this roster if she's healthy. So that's my bold prediction. I think Mallory Pugh actually has a better chance of making this roster than both Lynn Williams and Sophia Smith. That's a bit of a hot take, but that's what I'm sticking with. Mallory Pugh is simply, out of her, Lynn Williams, and Sophia Smith, the most talented of the three, and she's proven that time and time again, especially as a winger. I mean, she's terrific all the way around, through and through. And in the end, guys and gals, talent always wins. It's not about which players deserve it. Talent always wins. I always have this argument with myself, so this is a little bit of a rant. Working hard, obviously, is a very important part of perfecting your craft in sports. I guarantee you all these ladies work themselves to the bone and have their entire careers, but at the end of the day, talent always wins. Those who are going to make the roster, who are going to have the big moments in the games, have the biggest impact, are those that have the most talent. And in this particular case, when it comes to the wingers and these players on the bubble, Megan Rapinoe is the most talented, and I'd say Mallory Pugh is the most talented of the rest. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Maybe I should be a little bit more clear. Let me back up for a second. Mallory Pugh is the most talented of her, Lynn Williams, Sophia Smith. I'm just going to emphasize that one more time to avoid confusion. So that's where I kind of set myself in terms of that aspect. So now let's move on a little bit further. So now, one other person that's at least in the conversation, excuse me, the comeback kid of the year, obviously, is Christy Muah. She has had one heck of a year with the Houston Dash, winning the Challenge Cup, having an excellent performance in the Fall Series, and scoring in the friendly against the Netherlands, and playing alongside her sister, and making her first appearance for the United States since, I think 2014, so 6-7 years. She has had one of the best years I've ever seen out of anybody this year, because everyone's had a really interesting year this year, but I just don't think that small sample size of this year is enough to get Christy Muah to break into the powerhouse of a midfield that is the United States. If our midfield was not as strong and didn't have 5 players that were world class, I think I could see Christy getting in. But between Lindsey, Rose, Sam, Julie, Carly might even be in that mix. Katerina Macario, I know Vladko really, really wants to see because she is the future. Katerina Macario is the future. I just don't think that there's enough room in this small, limited Olympic roster for Christy Muah as of right now. If this was a World Cup roster, I think she's got a shot. But at this particular point, I don't think there's a big enough sample size, enough conviction to see Christy ultimately break into the squad. I could be wrong, because she's been in the last 2 camps for Vladko, which is a really good sign. But I don't think it's quite enough to break into this absolutely world-beating midfield that we have for the United States. So that's kind of where I lie on the spectrum for Christy Muah. Moving on to the 2 goalkeepers I have in my bubble list, that's Jane Campbell and Aubry Bledsoe. I think Aubry Bledsoe is the more talented of the 2 keepers. I know Jane Campbell is a really good and skilled defender when it comes to penalty kicks. Penalty kicks almost never happen. Out of all the games you watch, how many of them are going to go into penalties? A fraction of a fraction. You might see, this might even be me being generous here, but 5% of all games you're going to see somebody come in and defend for penalties. It's not a reason to bring a goalkeeper to a major tournament like the Olympics. And I don't think Jane Campbell has really solidified herself as a world-beating goalkeeper, and I don't think she's more talented than Aubry Bledsoe, Ashlynn Harris, or Alyssa Nair. I know a lot of people are high on her and they say she deserves it. Like I said, talent always wins in the end. I don't think Jane Campbell's more talented than the other 3 aforementioned goalkeepers, which is why I have her on the bubble, because I think in the future she's got a shot. She's young still, but as of right now, I don't see her making the roster. That kind of brings me to Aubry Bledsoe, and I already kind of aforementioned her before. I think she's the more talented of her and Jane Campbell. I think she's been a little bit more consistent in the last few years. And she's going to have a really good season, I think, with the Spirit now that they've got Emily Sonnet and Kelly O'Hara in the back line. It's going to be great, but that's a whole nother topic for another time. I just think Aubrey Bledsoe is the more talented of the two. And honestly, if she had a little bit more experience, I could almost see her being picked over Ashlynn Harris. Um, as I was saying earlier, the main reason why I had Ashlynn Harris is because she's still one of the world's best, and she also has more major term experience than any other goalkeeper who plays for the U.S. But Aubrey Bledsoe, she definitely gives you something to think about. If they had a third goalkeeper that they were taking, I would definitely take Aubrey Bledsoe for sure. She's a stud. Now, I didn't put this player in my bubble list. I already talked about her a little bit. That's Adriana France. Like I said, Adriana's been hurt all year, and I think she still is. So I don't think she will. I don't think she'll play. We'll see her at all in the United States women's national team roster for the Olympics. But time will tell. Who knows? Maybe the end episode could get back in action, and she could play out of her mind. But who knows? I still think Adriana is one of the more talented keepers. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, talent does not disappear overnight. It does not disappear overnight. But with a major injury like that, I still think she's going to be probably hurt. So that's why I did not even have her on my bubble list. So guys, that's kind of my prediction for the 2021 Tokyo Olympic roster. I'm going to recap it one more time for you guys. So here's who I have in my roster list. I've got Kristen Press, Alex Morgan, Tobin Heath, Rose Lavelle, Sam Ewis, Julie Ertz, Lindsey Herrera, Katerina Macario, Becky Sauerbrunn, Abby Dahlkemper, Kelly O'Hara, Crystal Dunn, Kieran Davidson, Carly Lloyd, Ellie Krieger, Megan Rapinoe, Alyssa Nair, and Ashlynn Harris. Those are my 18 that are making the roster. And hopefully they can do what no other United States team has ever done. I don't think any team has ever done in general, and win the World Cup, and then in the very next Olympics win that as well. So I think this team has a real shot to do it. There is a ton of talent on this roster, and with how they handled the Netherlands pretty easily, or pretty dominantly in the last friendly, I think they can do it. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes on. Guys, what are your thoughts about my roster predictions? Feel free to comment down in the comments if you're on YouTube, Anchor, and Spotify. I don't think you guys can comment. I'm kind of new to this podcasting thing, so if I see in comments, well, then prove me wrong. But yeah, in the comments, feel free on YouTube if you're watching this, drop them down below. Let me know. I'm really curious. Where do you disagree with me in spots? I want to know. I love spirited debates about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. So don't be shy. Feel free to comment below. Let me know. And we'll continue the discussion down there. But that'll wrap it up for main topic number 1, everybody. I've got 2 other main topics on the docket. They're probably going to take a little less long because they're like sub-main topics, but enough about that. Let's get into main topic number 2. Our second main topic is going to be Gothenburg FC, or Gothenburg, I believe is how you say it in Swedish. For those of you who don't know what that team is, Gothenburg FC is a Champions League team who just won the Damallsvenskan League in 2020. They just won their first title. If they sound familiar, it's because Kristen Press actually started playing with them, I believe, in 2000 and 16? It was a little bit earlier in her career. It might have even been earlier than that, so I got to fact check myself later. But Emily Sana just won the title with them. She went on loan to them for the Orlando Pride before she got traded to who did Emily just get traded to? The Washington Spirit, sorry. And what happened was on Tuesday, this was, I believe, let me double check the date. It was December 28th, I believe it was. December 29th. On December 29th, this is just a few days before, it was announced that the club was actually going to be dissolving. They were going to be folding. The club has always been sponsored and owned, I believe, by a local brewery in Sweden. And after Gothenburg lost the round of 32 in the Champions League to Manchester City, the CEO pretty much said all of these big clubs around the world, like Manchester City, Juventus, have started to realize the value in women's football and have started to invest tons of money into it. And Gothenburg does not have a men's club affiliated with their women's club. They're not paired together. And I don't believe a men's club in Gothenburg even exists. And without that additional financial backing, the owners pretty much said, we're dissolving the club because we're not going to be able to compete in the long run. There's some long-term stability questions, so they said we're going to dissolve the club and we're going to call it a day. So for a few days, all the Gothenburg FC players were free agents, and what really stunk was they weren't going to be able to defend their title in the Damallsvenskan League in Sweden for 2021, so it was a huge bummer. News broke yesterday, on New Year's Eve, ironically enough, so yesterday, that after that they made that announcement on Tuesday, there was such a large response from investors that basically a pool of investors came in and saved the club, so now they're not dissolving anymore, which is fantastic news for women's football as a whole because, one, I think it really speaks to the power that women's football is starting to have. It's starting to pick up traction, it's starting to gain world popularity, which is great. And also, it's great that they can go ahead and defend their title for 2021 and hopefully play for more Champions League glory, which is great. That story was broken by the Associated Press yesterday. The one thing I couldn't find in the article was who the specific investors were for saving the club. The only information that they gave was that it was private individuals, companies, and other football teams as well, which I thought was pretty interesting, but they never gave any specifics. So I'm expecting more details to come out in the near future, but nonetheless, I think this really speaks to the power of women's football and what a great direction it's going to. The fact that there was such a heartfelt and dedicated response by investors in order to save the club and take it on as their own. So good on all the investors for doing so, and Mazel Tov, because that's fantastic. One interesting thing I wanted to touch on when they said potential investors could include individuals, private individuals, that was companies and other football teams. That kind of concerns me a little bit, and I'm going to tell you why. There is sort of a system, I know of that in men's football anyway, where one parent club will own like 5 or 6 other men's clubs as well. So, sorry, I keep getting distracted by the notifications on my phone. Let me give an example. One of my best friends, he is a diehard Charlton Athletic fan. He was kind of telling me that Charlton Athletic is essentially a feeder club because they are owned by another football club from another league in another country. Now, think about it this way. Say you're a club at the very top of the totem pole, and your club owns 5 other clubs from around the world. Ideally, what you're going to do, and this is just natural, and it kind of makes business sense, but what you're going to do is you're going to use those other clubs that you've bought in order to feed your main club, in order to make it successful, grow players, grow revenue, but you're going to suck the life out of all the other clubs that you're feeding off of, hence the name, feeder clubs. That's happened to Charlton Athletic with their ownership. That's from what I know from my friend. Like I said, some of this information could be outdated. It's been a while, but this practice is not it's not unique to Charlton. Manchester City own, I believe, a few other clubs as well. But what does this have to do with Gothenburg? If another football team buys Gothenburg, another women's football team, I wonder if there's a possibility that could happen again. I wonder if Gothenburg could end up becoming another feeder club for another women's football club. So, for example, this is a little ironic, but what if Manchester City buys Gothenburg as an investor, as the major stakeholder? That's a little worrisome because you never want feeder clubs because it alienates fan bases, because they just know that all the talent that they grow, all the titles that they win, all the money and resources they pull in are not going to the club that they absolutely love. They're going to the club at the top of the totem pole, the top of the food chain. That's never good because you're going to lose your fan base. You're going to lose the faith. You're going to lose the financial investment. That's never good to alienate your fan base. Your fan base is everything. Hence the issues that we've had in terms of finances for Gothenburg. But that's just one thing that kind of crossed my mind. I want to know what you guys think about that. Or do you know any other examples of feeder clubs as well on the men's or the women's side? I'd love to hear about them more. Comment below. Let me know, and we'll kick off more conversation. So with that kind of does it for topic number 2. Main thing is that Gothenburg is not dissolving anymore, which is fantastic. And I think it's really evidencing the strength of women's football and what it has on investors. And I think that people are really starting to buy in. It's going to keep growing the club and growing the brand over time. So good on Gothenburg. Shout out and cheers to them. All right. With that down, let's go into main topic number 3 of what's been going on in the world of women's soccer this week, women's football. Mallory Pugh. Sorry about that, guys. Mallory Pugh and Sarah Waldmo have been traded from Sky Blue FC to the Chicago Red Stars. This is an NWSL trade for those of you who don't know. This was announced, I believe, Wednesday that Mallory Pugh and Sarah Waldmo were being traded, and this trade made a ton of sense for me personally, at least from what I thought as an outsider looking in. This is what the Chicago Red Stars got Mallory Pugh and Sarah Waldmo. Sky Blue in return got the 4th and 8th pick in the 2021 collegiate draft. They also got an international roster slot for 2021 and 2022, and they also got a conditional first round pick in the NWSL Collegiate Draft for 2022. What that condition is, I have no idea. But the point is, we've kind of been seeing this pattern with Sky Blue the last season or so. They've got new front office staff. They've got, I believe, a new president. They've also re-signed some of their stars like Ifioma and Amanu. They've seen a lot of really promising play out of Paige Monahan. And they've also been kind of gaining a lot of draft picks and also trading away dead weight isn't a good way to put it, but players that they're not high on, players that they're not sure about. Mallory Pugh kind of fits that bill, and I'm going to explain why. Like I said earlier, Mallory Pugh has had a lot of injuries and hasn't played a ton for Sky Blue, but she's a really strong world-class talent that can do a lot of good for your team. So I think where they're coming from here is there's probably not a future for Mallory Pugh with Sky Blue. Let's trade her away. Let's get some draft picks. We'll get the team young. We'll advance them. We'll build a solid foundation for Sky Blue FC, and then hopefully in future years, our club's going to grow, it's going to expand, and we're going to start winning championships. That's really, really consistent with what they've been doing the past season or two, so this trade for them made a ton of sense. The only thing that kind of stunk for them was Sarah Waldmo. She's pretty young, and she was actually the club's captain as of late, and she made, I believe, 111 appearances for them, and they traded her away. I believe the main reason was because Sarah Waldmo's family is residing in Chicago, and obviously being separated from your family, that's hard on anybody. So I think they kind of did her a bit of a favor here and said, okay, this is an opportunity. We're going to trade Mal anyway. We're going to trade you two and gain an additional draft pick or so. And then you can be with your family. We can have draft picks. We can grow our club, and all will be good. And on the Sky Blue side of things, like I said, this makes a ton of sense. And I also think this makes a ton of sense on the Chicago Red Stars side of things. Here's why. The Chicago Red Stars since 2015 have made it to either the final or the semifinal every single year, but they haven't won it yet. They've gotten so close, but they just for some reason cannot win it all. And given the trades that they've been having this year, for example, the trade that they struck with Racing Louisville that helped them keep a lot of their core United States Women's National Team talent and also some of their powerhouses like Alyssa Nair, Julie Ertz, Morgan Gautreau, and others as well. Some of these power trades, they're excellent because they're not only keeping the excellent team that they have, they're also adding weapons too. Like I said, Mallory Pugh is one of the most talented young players in the entire world, and she can make a big difference in attack for your team. If Mallory Pugh can stay healthy, Chicago Red Stars is going to have a great attack on them. They're going to have her, Kaylee Watt. They're going to be in really good shape, not only on the attacking, but the midfield and the defensive and the goalkeeping side of things. And they're going to be probably the strongest squad in the NWSL, and I think this is a really big indicator that they are willing to take risks and that they're willing to really push for the title this year. They want it all. They want to finally win the title, and I don't blame them, and I think this trade is evidence of that. And plus, too, with Sarah Waldmo, they've got an experienced midfielder to kind of bolster what they already have, so that's another good sign as well. So I think this is really good for both Chicago and Sky Blue, and I'm going to call it right now. I think Chicago is going to win the NWSL title this year. They'll win it all. This is their year. If Mallory Pugh can stay, even if Mallory Pugh doesn't stay healthy, I think they've still got a really good shot at it. But if Mallory Pugh stays healthy, they're almost a shoo-in. And I wouldn't even be surprised if the Red Stars went after more attacking talent and got another attacker, just in case what happens with Mallory Pugh kind of falls through. So we'll see how that goes, but that's kind of just my thoughts on that trade. I think the Red Stars are going to win it all for the NWSL. I'm going to call it now, and I'm going to stick to it throughout the season. So that's where we're at with that. All right, guys. So we're at just about time. Now we're about 58 minutes in, so this is perfect. Thank you all for sticking with me on this pilot episode of the Women's Soccer/Football podcast. Like I said, my name is Bryce, and we're going to probably be doing this podcast just about weekly. If you're listening on Anchor or Spotify, welcome. I appreciate you all. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to check out some of my stuff on TikTok and Instagram. You can find me pretty much anywhere at bankrupt_hippo. That's pretty much my tag. I'll tag them also down in the YouTube comments below as well. I like to publish women's soccer content just about every day. If you love women's soccer, you love women's football, and you want to talk about it more, you've come to the right place. We have a really nice community here. We even have a Discord chat if you're interested in that. There's something for everybody here. We talk about coffee as well. I love coffee, like I mentioned earlier. that's neither here nor there when it comes to women's football. But either way, that's kind of what we got cooking here. Also, I do a weekly live stream every Friday on Instagram at about 3:30 p.m. Central, depending on various factors. Like with the holidays this week, I did my live stream a day early. Like I said, it's neither here nor there. But like I said, Instagram, TikTok. I'm even looking on getting on Twitter at bankrupt_hippo. You can pretty much find me anywhere that on any platform that you need. So I think that'll do it for me, guys. I've been Bryce. This has been the Women's Soccer/Football Podcast. We can't wait to see you for next time. Take care, and as always, have a great day. We'll see you next time.